They told me not to talk to Arthur Caldwell. Just will him down to his swallow study, sign the transport log, and get back to the floor for my next pickup. I'd pushed that wheelchair 4 months running, and in 4 months nobody on that unit had said his name like it belonged to a man instead of a chart number. Then the elevator doors closed, and his eyes found mine, and they were trying to tell me something nobody had bothered to look for. I almost let it go. I'd built a quiet life out of letting things go. 3 years ago, I was Dr. Mason Hale, board certified in neurocritical care, the kind of doctor families got sent to when the other doctors ran out of answers. Then my wife died on a Tuesday in March, and I looked at my daughter Ren's face across the kitchen table and understood I could not keep the hours that job demanded and still be the father she needed. So I took off the white coat and put on a transport badge. 8-hour shifts, no call, home every night by 6. Most mornings now started the same way. Ren at the counter in her socks, drawing something from my locker while I made pancakes. She insisted on flipping herself, badly, every single time. I had 6 of her drawings taped up by then, none of them straightened, all of them facing out so the other transport staff could see them when they passed. The hospital got a man who pushed wheelchairs and said nothing about what he used to know. I got my evenings back. I'd call that a fair trade for 3 years and meant it, and most days I still believe it was. Arthur Caldwell had been in room 412 for 4 months, ever since the stroke that took most of his right side, and according to every specialist who'd examined him, most of what made him Arthur Caldwell. The chart called it a poor candidate for further intervention. The new Corporate Efficiency Review, Pathway Protocol, rolled out hospital-wide that spring under his own daughter's signature, called it something colder, a transfer order. 10 days, and room 412 would belong to someone else, and Arthur would belong to a long-term facility 40 miles away with no neurology department at all. I mentioned it once to his attending early on, just in passing while I waited for her to finish a chart note at the nurse's station. His left, I does a lot of work for somebody they've written off, I said, careful to sound like an aide, making conversation and nothing more. Dr. Okafor wasn't unkind about it. She was just tired, carrying 40 patients and a protocol that told her exactly where to spend her limited hours and exactly where not to. Lots of stroke patients track movement reflexively, she said, not looking up from the screen. It's not the same as intention. I wish it were. I genuinely do. She believed that. I understood why. The chart agreed with her. The literature she'd been trained on agreed with her. A hospital running on a 40-patient caseload doesn't leave room to chase a hunch that contradicts both. I just happened to know, from 11 years of standing where she was standing, that a chart is a snapshot taken under pressure, and a snapshot isn't always the last word. Only the easiest one to trust when you're out of time to look closer. I wasn't supposed to know any of that, technically. Transport aides don't get briefed on prognosis. But old habits don't leave a man just because his badge changed color. In the elevator that morning, Arthur's left eye tracked me. Not randomly, purposefully, the way a man tracks something he's trying to point at. I followed the line of it to the laminated alphabet card clipped to his bed rail. The one nobody had touched in weeks because nobody believed it still mattered. You want that? I asked, and reached for it before I could talk myself out of it. His eye held steady on mine. Once, slow and deliberate. Yes. I should have logged it and let the speech team handle it on their own schedule, which according to the chart was 9 days out, the day before his transfer. I didn't. I wheeled him back to 412, clocked out my transport shift, and stayed 40 minutes past, off the clock, holding that card in front of a man everyone else had stopped looking at. It took him 6 minutes to spell clock. I checked the wall. It was 2:14. He wanted to know the time. A man strapped to a bed for 4 months, and the first thing he fought his own body to ask for was what time it was, like he still had somewhere to be. I came back the next day, and the next. I told myself it was 20 minutes, unpaid, off my own break, nothing that crossed any line that mattered. I taught myself again how to read the smallest signal a damaged brain can send, a held gaze, a delayed blink, the faint tremor at the corner of a mouth that used to mean something and might mean something still. Day 6, he spelled Ren, because I'd mentioned her without thinking and his eye had gone sharp with interest, the way a grandfather's does. Day 12, I brought in a photograph his nurse had on file. Arthur Younger, standing in front of the hospital's original entrance with a shovel and a ribbon, and he held my gaze on it for nearly 30 seconds, like he was trying to climb back inside that day. Day 19, he made a sound that wasn't quite a word but had the shape of one. There were bad days too, days I should put down honestly. Day 24, nothing. No tracking, no blink pattern, just a man staring at the ceiling while I sat there feeling foolish for believing a transport badge and 40 stolen minutes could undo what a stroke had done. I almost stopped. I told myself the chart had probably been right all along, and that I was keeping an old man and his daughter, hoping for something that wasn't coming. Then on day 27, he caught my sleeve with 2 working fingers as I stood to leave and held on, and I understood that hope wasn't mine to take back just because it was inconvenient to keep carrying. Day 33, sitting up with the head of his bed, raised the way the speech team never bothered to try because the order sheet didn't call for it. He said his first clear syllable in 4 months. T, he said, time. I laughed out loud in an empty hospital room, and then I had to sit down for a minute because I'd forgotten what that felt like, being the reason something impossible happened. I should have told someone sooner. I know that now. But the moment I told anyone, it stopped being mine to keep doing quietly, and some stubborn part of me wanted to bring it as far as it could go before anybody with a clipboard decided it was a liability instead of a man's voice coming back. That part of me lost the argument on day 38 when the hospital's risk director, a careful man named Pruitt, pulled badge access logs for 412 and found 40 unauthorized after-hours entries by a transport aide with no clinical privileges on file. He called me into a small conference room with Dr. Okafor sitting beside him, both of their faces arranged in the particular calm of people who have to follow a procedure they don't necessarily enjoy following. You understand I have to report this, Pruitt said, sliding a printed log across the table. 40 rows, 40 timestamps, my badge number on every one. Unauthorized contact, undocumented intervention, on a patient flag for transfer. I'm not saying you did anything with bad intent. I'm saying it isn't your job to do it. And if this had gone wrong instead of right, this hospital would be looking at a lawsuit, and you'd be looking at a board complaint with my name on it, whether I wanted to file it or not. Understand, I said, and I did. I'd known the bill would come due the first night. I stayed 40 minutes past my shift. I just hadn't expected it before the work was finished. Dr. Okafor hadn't said anything yet. She finally looked up from the log. 40 entries, she said quietly, like she was doing arithmetic on something other than the page. What did you actually do in that room, Mason? Mostly I listened, I said. He'd been trying to tell somebody something for 4 months. Nobody had time to sit still long enough to hear it. Helena Caldwell came to 412 herself the next morning, which told me how seriously they were taking it. I'd seen her in the halls before, sharp suits, faster than everyone around her, a woman who'd taken over her father's company 8 months earlier and had been trying to run it the way the spreadsheets told her to, ever since the stroke took the man who used to run it on instinct. She didn't look angry walking in. She looked like someone bracing for one more piece of bad news in a year that had already handed her more than its share. Mr. Hale, she said, reading my badge like it was the only thing she had to go on. I need to understand what's been happening in my father's room. I didn't defend myself. I just pulled the alphabet card from the bedside table, the laminate gone soft and curled from 40 days of use, and held it where Arthur could see it. Mr. Caldwell, I said, can you tell your daughter what day it is? As I moved to the card, found the letters, and then, slow and rough, dragging the sound up from somewhere 4 months of silence hadn't managed to bury, he said it. Not spelled. Said, Wednesday. Helena didn't move for a long moment. Then she crossed the room and took her father's hand, and he turned his head, turned it, something the chart said he couldn't reliably do anymore, and looked at her and said the only other word he had ready. Elena. I have stood in a lot of hospital rooms in my life. I have never heard one go that quiet, or watched a woman who ran a company of 9,000 people come apart that gently, like she'd just been handed back something she didn't know she'd already buried. It took Pruitt's office one phone call to a credentialing database to find out who I used to be. Dr. Mason Hale, board-certified neurocritical care, 11 years of practice before I walked away. They could have fired me for the after-hours entries regardless of the outcome. The policy didn't bend just because the story had a happy ending. Helena overruled that within the hour, and I respected her more for asking why I'd hidden it than for the apology that came with overruling it. "Why didn't you tell anyone what you used to do?" she asked me 2 days later in the hallway outside her father's room, where he was now sitting up working through short sentences with the real speech team, the ones who'd finally been told to take him seriously. "Because the job I have now lets me pick my daughter up at 3:15, I said. "The job I used to have didn't." She didn't argue with that. She asked me instead what it would take to make sure no other family got a transfer letter for someone who still had a syllable left to fight for. I told her the truth. That pathway protocol wasn't wrong to want efficiency, only wrong to assume a spreadsheet could see what a person sitting beside the bed sometimes could. I asked for one thing: that every transfer recommendation get a documented bedside review by someone, anyone, with eyes on the patient and no deadline pressing on them, before a number on a chart got the final word. She wrote it into policy herself, by hand, before she left the building that night, and named it after no one because I asked her not to. She also asked if I'd come back to medicine. Full credentials reinstated, neurocritical care, the work I'd thought I'd given up for good. I told her I would. 3 days a week, mornings only, so I could still be standing in the school parking lot at 3:15 with Ren's name on my lips instead of a patient's. She didn't blink at the condition. She just said that sounded like exactly the kind of doctor her father's hospital needed more of. Arthur Caldwell went home 7 weeks later, walking with a cane and well enough to argue with his daughter about whose turn it was to pick the restaurant on Sunday, which Helena told me was the most normal thing he'd done in over a year. I still see him sometimes in the cafeteria, where he insists on buying my coffee, even though I keep telling him a transport aide's old salary doesn't owe a man like him anything. Dr. Okafor stops me in the hall now and then too, not to apologize, just to ask how Ren's doing, which I've come to understand is her way of saying she's glad I didn't listen to her the one time it counted. Ren asked me once, drawing at the counter while I made pancakes, what I did at work that made everybody so happy to see me lately. I told her the truth, the only version that's ever mattered to me. I helped a man find his voice again, I said, and it turned out I still had one of my own worth using. There's a new drawing on my locker now, the 7th one, a crooked alphabet card with a clock drawn next to it. Ren doesn't know what it means. I haven't told her the whole story yet, only that a man once spent 6 minutes spelling out a single word because he still had somewhere to be. Someday, I'll tell her the rest. For now, it's enough that every morning at 3:15, I'm exactly where he was trying so hard to get back to.